we go, Brown. Here we go. Yeah, this for my dogs from the east to the west side. You rockin' brown and orange with me, baby. Let's ride. Represent the land, let them know. Tell them, here we go, Brownies. Here we go. Yeah, here we go.
Well, guys, welcome to another edition of the Here We Go Brownie Show. This week we have a lot to unpack, guys. A disappointing loss for our Cleveland Browns down in Houston, but we are still Browns fans. We woke up Monday and Sunday hurt a little bit more than they normally do. Allie, of course, is taking a sabbatical. She is doing her work trip this week, but we are blessed to have the Super Bowl champion coach Greg Williams and his son Blake Williams, former NFL coach. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
Doing good. Thanks for
doing, man.
So, guys, let's get into it. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. The Browns obviously lost 45-14. They looked like they were kind of getting into this game, starting to, find some mojo in that first, second quarter. And then the third, halftime came, and then the third quarter, the wheels came off. We're all fans at heart, right? You guys coached on this team. You have a love affair, with the city and these fans. Kind of tell us, let's start, what were you seeing? We'll just kind of break it quarter by quarter. What were you feeling after kickoff, and what did you guys see or anything, or any kind of warning signs, I guess, of anything prior to, as the game got away from us?
Well, we talked about this in our show, Come Get Some. And the three most critical things going into this game were us making sure we
we're just having some connection issues.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And we were leading the league in giveaways, and we got to stop doing that. And anytime in the playoffs that you give a ball away or turn the ball over, it's extremely hard to overcome. And then if you give up one and it puts points on the board with a defensive score on the other team, it's extremely hard. But we gave up two, and we gave touchdowns on interceptions, and you can't do that. We needed to eliminate the drop passes that we were having. We were up near the top in the league in that. And a few of the drops were critical drive-changing plays that needed to be, not there. And then the most important thing is, which, our defense has been dominant all year long, hasn't been as good on the road, but we gave up explosive plays and then explosive plays that put points on the board. And those things right there, are disasters, to your team and your win-loss percentages, your winning percentage on the road in the playoffs. And I'll be daggone if we didn't hit all three.
Blake, what was your thoughts as you kind of were kind of looking at that?
Yeah, I mean, it happened to be just like, and G-Dub just touched on it right there, right? It happened to be one more game of, really epic. I mean, there's been a lot of stats out there, epic disparity between road defense and home defense. And I don't know, grand scheme of things, like what's necessarily happened or what's going on there. But when you have something like that, even if just the record was such, right? Like you got, difference between home and away, with somebody like a Dallas or some of those other teams. You got to look at, hey, what you're doing on the road versus what you're doing at home, in those sort of things. But that stuck out. And then, I mean, a lot's been made of, because I think there's hope, right? You go into halftime, and I think fans are watching and everything. There's a lot's been made of, okay, and you come out and you throw those pick sixes, back to back, sort of situations, right? And and it just broke the spirit. And this is just me talking from like what I was watching.
Sure.
I think I don't know that they made any real change in the game. From very early in the game until late in the game, the offensive play caller and CJ Stroud and the offense did whatever they wanted for a large part whenever they wanted to, and they pulled off the reins, they're late, right? And so if we don't throw those picks, right, but we maybe kick field goals or score touchdowns or don't score, or whatever it is, I didn't see anything that their offense wouldn't have taken right over and thrown a 40-yard touchdown pass right over the top, on the very next play.
Gotcha.
Just that game was going right. And so it was just one of those rough days, quicksand type days, that I talked about. And the defense just wasn't able to, get themselves out of it.
Yeah, Greg, let me ask you this question. There was a lot made of this is, I think, one of the only playoff teams that's ever been able to get to the playoffs with creating that many turnovers in a regular season, right? To be able to overcome those and actually make a playoff appearance. And I think there's some stat out there where whichever team has the most turnovers, typically 87% of the time loses the ball game, right? I mean, that's a stat. So do you think this is maybe a little bit of this maybe caught up with this football team finally? Those turnovers, you couldn't overcome something like that in a playoff game versus a regular season game. And, with those pick sixes and some of that, do you think that kind of came back to bite us a little bit because of that, having some of those woes in the regular season?
Yes, I do. And that has been going on week.
Oh, lost them there. Hang on one second here.
Good coach, and the mark of any really good team is the ability to affect change. And that change was not affected, especially at the end of the year. It's extremely hard to overcome those negative plays when the talent disparity between playoff teams, has shrunk to the part you don't get a lot of good plays coming back to you, or gifts or giveaways coming back to you. And I'll tell you what, CJ Stroud has done a phenomenal job all year long. You can call him a rookie, whatever you want. He does not turn the ball over. He does not give it away. The other thing that Blake and I talked about in our show this week was I didn't like the body language. I didn't like the thing where we saw, be it players or coaches, be emotionless or just be, looking down, all that kind of stuff. And that when you're going against a fierce, when you're in the middle of the ring and you're fighting, they can look you in the eye and see you give up, or see you not give up, but be registered less intensity. And we got to overcome that too. We have philosophies that we go about every single day in meetings, every single day in practices and that kind of stuff, that I'm a body language expert, and you can't allow that body language to take over your emotions to win a game, to win a play, to defend or play every blade of grass. And that wasn't good either.
Yeah, I think your opponent senses weakness, right? When they see that, they sense it. And I will tell you, you never were without emotion on the sidelines. I remember watching you as the interim head coach as well as the defensive coordinator. I think the players knew where you felt the tempo of the game was going. And I will never forget the video where you literally at halftime said, if you're on defense, bleepity bleep, get over here. So I definitely think players, I think players react to emotion. And Allie and I have talked about this on previous shows. You want your team and your coaches to have some give a damn in them, if that makes sense.
When plays like that happen, we call that a sudden change. It's a sudden change of field position, point participation, all that type of stuff. And we have a philosophy of exactly how we're going to respond. And we practice that response in meetings. We practice that response on game day. It's not like it's a surprise that all of a sudden that happens. We have a demeanor that we are going to show you after a play like that. And I'm not sure it still goes on that way anymore, whether it be offense, defense, special teams. I don't know if that goes on anymore there, but it's my fault if you don't understand that, and it needed to be better.
Yeah, you're right. I think you need to I almost say have that same moxie that you had in the Ravens game, right? Where we were down by 14 or 17 points. You don't blink and you keep, like you said, you don't get down, you don't blink. And you're right. I think after those two pick sixes, the wind had just was gone.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I totally agree. And again, I don't know. I don't know why, right? When you talk about some of those, the moxie of this team and fighting through some of, things and all that type of stuff, this season, if you go back and really think about so many of those things, they'll come back. Those big moxie games were at home. I don't know if it's I know what it's like to play in that stadium, right? Like, here right outside my office window right here, you know what I mean? And so I know what it's like to play in that Brown stadium. So I don't know if it's a byproduct of like that being such an energizing thing for this defense, and home field advantage, and then just not having that, that fuel. But it's something they clearly have to figure out between this season and next season, is how to play and how to and travel on the road. They say defense and a good defense and a good run game are supposed to travel, right. and it didn't over the course of 9 or 10 games, so a large sample size this year, and so they're gonna have to get that figured out.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, hang on, we're just gonna add Greg back on here. He's having a little along those lines, fortunately for me, living out here in the West, I'll be, as everybody knows, I announced I'm moving to Cleveland last week. But I got to go see the Seahawks and Browns game. I was fortunate to go watch the Browns and the Rams play. I didn't go to Denver. But I will tell you, what I did notice was the one thing I did pick up on is they just played like polar opposites this year for whatever reason when they were on the road versus home, with that 8-1 home record. I was there a couple weeks ago for Thursday Night Football. I'm sure you guys were there. That was electric. I mean, Nick Chubb coming out and slamming the guitar and all that. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to be any other place. And I think the Jets knew they lost the game before kickoff based on the energy in that stadium. And again, right, Greg, bringing that type of energy, like that Thursday night game, to that playoff game. And it's interesting. I don't know why they haven't been able to sustain that, especially the defense, translate over on the road, because they play lights out defense at home, and then they seem to give up a little bit on the road. What is your philosophy on that, Greg? I mean, obviously you've traveled with defenses on the road and at home. Like, what was your philosophy when you took that on the road versus a home game?
I'm glad you asked that. And that, one of the things, we had an on the road philosophy, and we talk about, we understand
where he was going there is our philosophy on the road is we're going to play the same way. Like, Gito would always talk about it. He's like, you want to go out and play in the parking lot? Like, you want to go play right here? Wherever we play, they got to play as well too, and you can come get some. And that's some of the elements, like where come get some, like you can get it whenever, like we're not backing down. And then we had a philosophy as well too, is like our goal on the road was to get the home field to boo at halftime. Don't tell me about home field advantage. Don't tell me about anything and all this stuff like that. The defense should have the home field advantage. Our goal is by halftime, we want the home crowd, booing. And so like we took it, we knew that was like heavily upon like our defense, right, to take the home crowd, out of the game. You know what I mean? Some of those just great attitudinal come get some defenses that we had over time. I think about, we had raucous home environments because they, in part came to see the defense, and the defense play that way, right? But and the defense and the fans fed off of one another. But I think in those situations, it was definitely the defense and their aura and their mentality at all times, win, lose, or draw, that the fans at home were drawing off of, and not the opposite end, right? It can't be the opposite end, where you're only getting up and energized and everything, in front of the home crowd. And when you don't have that, like, you don't have a shot, And I preached all year long. We preached here all year long on the show. We hope it changes. We hope it changes. We hope it changes, because you can see where it's going. Turnovers, drops, road defense, being the Achilles heels. And it's like, we're going to have to not turn the ball over in the playoffs, and we're going to have to play on the road. You can just see where, the seeding was going to finish. And unfortunately, those things never transpired to get them fixed,
Right.
And Blake just hit a home run cover and all that stuff. But here's the other thing too. We have a philosophy section in our playbooks, and we cover this starting in the spring practices, training camp, everywhere. And then the night before a game, be it a home or be an away game, we have this philosophy we go about doing. And the number one thing in the world is that we talk about, we must make the home crowd boo before halftime. And we're going to count all the times that happened. And if it doesn't happen, then we may have to have some more energy at practice. Instead of doing some other things, I might just run your nuts off the next time at practice to make sure you understand what we're going to do.
Right. Well, guys, real quick, we're just going to give a shout out to our friends over at Stadium Mustard, guys. If you don't have Stadium Mustard in your fridge, you're doing it wrong. From ballparks to backyards, or if you're watching any of those NFL games this Sunday, and if you're in a part of the country where you're watching this show tonight and you can't get Stadium Mustard at your local grocery store, go to stadiummustard.com. Well, guys, we talked about this a little bit before we went on air tonight. Couple changes in Berea today. Some of them surprised some people. Maybe some of them didn't surprise you. Van Pelt's out, as the offensive coordinator, tied in. Stump kind of surprised me, the running backs coach, but wanted to get your guys' take specifically. You've been a part of the departed and the coming in, right? You've been on both ends of this from a coaching staff. What did you take of that? And what do you think, because you've been in there internally, what do you think brought that about, and what do you think the Browns are looking for in the future in those positions?
Yeah, we're going to comment on both back and forth on this. It'll take a little bit of time, but it really surprised me. And Blake saw it earlier this morning than I did. And it shocked me, to tell you the truth, because, Alex Van Pelt and I go back to all the time when I was the head coach of the Buffalo Bills. He played quarterback, and he's done a very good job. Kevin's the play caller. And the staff has been established all that time. And the staff really did a really good job all year long about managing 4 and even 5 starting quarterbacks, managing Nick Chubb's, injury, managing all the different movements on the offensive line, with the health of all that stuff. So it did shock me that way. And as we continue to study it, there'll be a method. It didn't happen behind the scenes in one day at the office. This has been going on something in Kevin and Andrew's mind for quite a while. And so they went ahead and implemented it today. Blake?
Yeah, again, it was a surprise because of the people as well, too, like who it was, the production of their roles, right? Like the production of their rooms. That's a hard part of the business sometimes, right? Like I go back to this. I lecture people about this, right? We went 0-16, and got contract extensions at the end of that year. That same year, the Tennessee Titans won their division, went to the playoffs, won a playoff game in the first round, and lost in the second round of the playoffs, and the whole staff got fired. Right? I've seen Marty Schottenheimer back in the day, another old Browns guy, but go 14-2 at the Chargers and go to the AFC Championship game and get beaten in the AFC Championship game by the eventual Super Bowl winner, and get fired. And everybody get canned. And so like there's no rhyme or reason in the grand scheme of things to it. Sometimes when you say, hey, just do your job, do a great job, be a great, not only be a great, team member and a great leader and whatnot, but then also like get your guys to produce. Those 3 guys did. Like you look at the running back room, you look at the Njoku, all right, in his development, and then even this year and whatnot, and then you look at the quarterback room, like all the stuff that they've done. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely clearly like something going on there. I've seen it before. I don't know what it is. Sometimes I'll say when you have, and we'll see what it ends up being. Sometimes we have 3 of these like this. I will say at times it's like it's not there's like collateral damage. So sometimes if you decide like, hey, we're going to bring in, you've already decided you're going to bring in a new coordinator, and the new coordinator says, and you're going to make him the play caller, say maybe Stefanski's going to step back from play calling, and that and that coordinator saying, okay, yeah, and I want some of my guys in there. Sure. I want this guy and that guy in there. Then other guys, have to go, like say, like a running back or a tight ends coach is collateral, damage on that.
Collateral damage, right?
Yeah, but I think it was a shock because of the production that those groups had, and then how beloved those guys were by everybody else. It's not good enough to just have everybody love you. Like, we're not there to be freaking like everybody's favorite uncle. Like, we're professional football coaches and professional players, right? I mean, you gotta have them produce as well too. But those guys did both of those things. So it's rough. It'll be interesting to see. And frankly, what I say now, and I think we all know it, right, wrong, or indifferent, whatever's about to happen is I wouldn't say the bullseye is out there, but like the highlight is out there that it's time for Deshaun Watson to produce and the offense to produce, or probably everybody's gone, right? I think maybe there's an element of this that's like, we got to find a way to get something out of our mega investment that we've made, and we got to get this offense going, or whatever it may be. And so it'll be interesting to see, but these are the type of moves that are made in general, like when the status quo is unacceptable, right? And you're kind of on the it's go time. It's improve or pink slips, sort of time. I've just seen it so many times before, right? It's not the type of things that, where the status quo is, okay or acceptable in an organization. It's not the type of things that are generally done.
And Blake, you beat me to it. Here's what I want you to watch. I want everybody out there to watch, because it's about, in my mind, it's about getting more out of the investment that was crazy in Deshaun Watson and all that money. But now watch and see which type of coordinators or who they're actually bringing in to do that. Do they have some type of relationship with Deshaun? Have they coached him before? Are those kind of guys available to try to elevate and get him back to where he was before the year off, before the injuries and all that kind of stuff? That was a home run, Blake, making sure that everybody understood that they've got to get more out of the investment of Deshaun, because Flacco did, in the 6 games he played, did all of a sudden statistically way above and beyond all the games Deshaun's already played.
Right.
And I want to make that note real quick, because I've been answering, obviously even around the, it's funny. It's like I run a big financial, firm now, with my partners, Lakefront Capital. And it's like, you still have the water cooler talk, right? And I'm still coaching like finances, but you still have, when you have stuff like this today, it's like, good Lord, I need to close my door and get my job done, because everybody just wants to talk about the Browns, right? But I made this point, right? Like we saw how quickly his teammates, and how quickly the fans and everybody who really, watches, the Browns gravitate towards Joe Flacco, right? And it's not just because he's a good person and a good human being and good teammate, okay? There's a lot of those out there, right? Like, we've had Josh McCown in here before, who's a great human being, great veteran leader, and stuff like that. You don't see this, right? What it was about is the players could see instantaneously, and then the fans who have been watching a poverty quarterback franchise, for a long time, say, oh, from day one, throw one, that is different. That is different, right? And people can smell it, people can see it, and whatnot. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, they're at that level where they're like, okay, well, that should not happen, or if it does happen, then we need to get that, out of Deshaun and the rest of the offense, all the time,
Well, as I say, for me, I got to see it firsthand, right? I went out to LA for that game, and that was Joe Flacco's first start.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, holy crap, he just went right down the field. Boom, 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 boom. Touchdown. I was like, okay, I haven't seen that. And to your point, it exposes things, Blake, right? All of a sudden, you're like, well, where the hell has that been, right? Why haven't we seen that coming out of the offense and stuff? And by the way, we don't have the most juggernaut wide receiver room and all those things, right? I mean, he's getting this into average guys' hands and making them playmakers, right? Um, it almost reminds you of a little bit of Tom Brady, right? He had average wide receivers other than Edelman and Gronk, right? But guess what? He got the ball into a lot of guys' hands and made them look really good because of that. So, Greg, so here's a question along those lines. Like you said, this wasn't done behind closed doors last night. And this had been probably on Andrew Barry's and Stefanski's radar for a while. Do you think when you make a move like this, because it is pretty dramatic, it is very, to the point, done, do you think there's somebody they already have in the wings in their mind, or people, or a handful of guys that they're already researching and looking at? Do you think right now?
Yes, I think there's a list. There's always a list made. And I learned this back in the early 90s. I have a list, an evaluation of every coach that's ever coached in the National Football League, who's available, who's not, all that type of stuff. I have it. And there's no doubt in my mind, there's been conversations. They have a short list right now. It can expand as they go, but a list has already been made. And also, don't be shocked. Jimmy Haslam's involved in it too. And he's looking at Andrew and Kevin and saying, hey, I got a lot of money in this quarterback. What are we going to do? I paid a lot of money and all that type of stuff. So his pressure on them could cause some things also. And it's not easy to look the other way. It's not easy, as that head coach or whatever and the GM to look away from the owner and those type of things. You have to understand that every day is an interview. Every single day in professional sports is an interview. And if you can't handle that, then go back and coach amateur and do all the other stuff, because that's what it is.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point, Greg. Like the point that look, let's watch and see how this develops. Is there a former coach out there or someone that's available that Deshaun has a very comfortable relationship with, and can kind of have that eyeball test and understand every little, intricate part of what makes him tick? So it'll be interesting to see if any of those guys are available. And I think you're right. If it is a guy like that wants to do the play calling or wants to bring in his own, staff, the running backs person and stuff like that, it'll be interesting to see how that. How quickly do you think they find somebody, guys? You've been around this, coming in when a coach leaves and one's coming in. There's 8 teams out there right now that have head coaching vacancies in the National Football League right now. It's quite a few. It's like what 20% of the league almost. 25% of the league does not have a head coach right now, which is kind of crazy. And the Browns aren't on that list, which is is sometimes
even more crazy. Yeah. No, I think there's already been people in, right? There's already been people in today.
Yes, today.
Which tells you both on the offense and defense side, right? There's already been coaches in today. And so that already tells you, right, that like conversations have been going on, prior, sort of things, right? And like you could say, hey, tampering, you can say this, that, or the other on the rules, but like also like coaches that are in today have significant backgrounds with other people, whether other people in the front office or defensive coordinator, or whatnot, right? And so those type of things happen, and it's clear when it's like that quick, right? Even with an NFL franchise, you're not like making these decisions and then necessarily just like all of a sudden going and getting on the phone with somebody and getting a plane ticket and getting them into town, like all like that, right? You have these conversations, and lists going on ahead of time. So I think they do know some of these people, right, ahead of time, and it'll be interesting to see, how much of an interview process it will be. I go back and I personally think, this is just me and I could be totally wrong, that you don't make those changes without already having the
plan B
people in place. You're not sitting there saying like, hey, no, we're just going to move on from these people. Like they're not good enough. like they're not getting the job done. And now we're going to have open interviews and like interview a bunch of candidates for the job. So to say, I think when it looks and smells more like one of those ones where the kind of the stuff has already been brokered and they know who it is, so it'll be interesting to see.
And as you see, there's not 8 jobs open, there's 7. And out of the 7 that are,
hang on one second, let's get it back on.
unless you've got some type of a mechanism protecting and not allowing the assistants on those 7 staffs. And by the way, I'm already hearing on some of those staffs that have been fired, there is interest in some of those coaches already, and we know that they brought the outside linebacker coach in from the Titans to talk about the D-line job, so he's out there, and they've got a couple of offensive coordinators that are on the streets right now.
One of whom, from New England, and so it'll be interesting to see, right? I don't know if that's, I'm not speaking anything in existence. I don't know if that's anything, right? But like, if that's who it is, right? Like if Bill O'Brien, somehow, some way becomes the offensive coordinator and play caller, like then you 100% know what the decision was made for and who's making the call, right?
And say that again, Blake. What was the name you mentioned? Sorry.
Bill O'Brien, right? Who was obviously the head coach and offensive coordinator, offensive play caller, that drafted Deshaun and coached him to his success, at the Houston Texans, and has been most recently the offensive coordinator at New England. Right. And obviously they're out, right? I mean, it's kind of that New England, like that's what G-Dub, when he got cut off right there, was kind of speaking to that one. That's what he said. There's only 7 openings, right? Because they just promoted from within. And Gerard May was giving some of those guys, opportunity to interview for roles on his staff or stay. Excuse me, but that may not necessarily be, Bill O'Brien. I was just saying, like, one of those, if it's like one of those sort of situations, right, where like the person's never coached with the head coach or some of these other coaches before, then it's like those are the type of decisions where you say, okay, that is made for the quarterback, and that's probably made by the person paying everybody's checks. There's different levels of situations, right? Like if it's a person like a Darrell Bevel, or something like that, somebody that's been, Kevin Stefanski's, boss, right? And Kevin Stefanski's coached under him, coached with him, there's that, and he coached with some of these, other coaches before and done it, and been a play caller a lot in the league, right? And has been down at the number 1 offense, in the league the last 2 years in Miami as the pass game, coordinator. Like, well, then you could say, okay, that one's a little bit more, from the head coach, and whatnot. So, hey, right, when different, it's again, I go back to say, like, when you make these decisions, they're like they got to work out. Same thing like last year with like Joe Woods. Like, let's just be honest, right? If the defense didn't play the way they played, at least at home this year and everything and whatnot, like the Browns would be probably one of those ones out, right? And so you make those decisions with the Joe Woods and the Mike Prefer, because that he didn't really want to make, Kevin Stefanski, would have liked to not have to make, because you have to, right? Or everybody's out if it doesn't change. The status quo has been said it's not good enough anymore. Right. And I think at the quarterback position, that investment in the offense, they're saying, okay, the status quo is not good enough anymore.
And I think one other thing we need to target and take a look at, he did a really good job by bringing a former head coach in on the defense. And I know Jim has been a really good voice behind the scenes and assisting, but maybe Kevin doesn't want to call plays anymore. Maybe he wants to hire an offensive coordinator to call the plays, again, that fits in Deshaun Watson's repertoire. And all of a sudden now he manages the game more from behind. And again, and another voice, because Darrell, you brought up that name. Darrell's a really good friend of mine. He's an outstanding coach. And I think he would probably be one on the list. He would be on my list. I don't know if he's on the list, but he's a good coach.
Yeah, and you guys bring up a good point, like, bringing somebody that's familiar with the offense and the defense. And Schwartz, came in, and here's what I think is amazing about the defense. and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg and Blake, but I believe the Browns from week 1 to week 17 never relented the number one defense in the league. They were statistically number one from
Yep.
game 1 to game 17, right?
Yep.
To me, that's almost statistically impossible to kind of do, right? You're going to have some ebb and flows
Yep.
in a season. And with so many injuries, and
Yep.
of course, the defense got a little way, obviously when you give up pick sixes, the other team gets more aggressive. What do you think holistically? Do you have to make a lot of changes? We always talk, there's always tough off-season moves you have to make with players, but is there anything you guys see as we flip that to the other side of the ball on the defense that would need to be changed or tweaked in any way on that side of the ball?
Go ahead, Blake.
I mean, one of the things is right, like the salary cap, and now they are, not to get off track, right, but like there's a lot of different ways to calculate the salary cap. They're one of the more brilliant people out there on understanding how to manage all that stuff. And if you have an owner that's willing to, there's a difference between the cap and like cash, right? And if you got an owner that's willing to / can shell out cash, way more cash than, say like the average baseline, roll year on year, you can find ways to roll that over and do it. But you have a cap issue, right? They're over the cap right now, saying who's going to be back, who's going to be re-signed. You're still out. You're right. We're still in this era of being out draft picks from the Deshaun Watson trade, at least high premium draft picks.
Right.
So what are you going to do? And so, you've got the JOKs,
Got a coach that wants to be able to holler at you right now. That's Dad.
Hi, buddy. Hey, buddy. Hey, Tristan, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
This show is called Here We Go Brownies, and you sing a song all day, every day around the house. Can you sing the song for us?
Sing it. Sing it.
Sing it.
Here we go.
I love that. All right. If I'm allowed to use that clip, I think I'm going to clip that out. And
You can 100%
Now,
use
Blake-
that clip. We took him up to, he was, so that's my son, my two kids for the viewers out there watching, Tristan. I've also got a first grade daughter that was born, or grown up. They're both raised here in Berea. But my son was a COVID baby. Like he was born right at the start of the COVID season. That was my last season coaching, before I retired. And so like, he doesn't really like, he sees all the stuff in the man cave downstairs, the pictures of Papa and I. He watches football with us, but he's never seen, I don't even think he's ever been to an actual football game. And he's never seen me personally in that environment, so to say. But we brought him to a tailgate, a Browns tailgate this year, and up to Burke Lakefront, airport where our studios are, and hung out or whatever. And he learned the "Here We Go Brownies" chant there at the Muni lot, that day. Yep. And he's just like, from that day on, like all day long, he was just doing it. Here we go, Brownies. Here we go. Hoo, hoo. And I swear he like wakes up doing that chant. He'll just randomly be sitting over there playing with his toys, and I'll hear him like start dog check barking and doing his "Here We Go Brownies" chant. So it's pretty funny, man.
Well, that's a good opportunity to talk about our guys over at Lorello Vineyards, guys. This is the Here We Go Brownies wine. You guys, speaking of tailgates, I know you've met Larry with his down there, but they are great sponsors of the podcast. And $3 of every one of these bottles goes back to the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. So it goes right back. A portion of that goes back to the community. But obviously they have red blends. I was talking with Larry today. He's out there literally, he's probably still there. He was going to join the show. He's now, he's watching us right now. But he's out there doing the ice wine. As you know, it's that time of season to do the ice wine. So he was picking a couple days ago, and now he's doing the ice wine. So
the godfather of the Muni lot himself.
Yeah, he says, we're in the Muni lot in our bus, and there's Greg and there's Blake, my friends. So guys, obviously, we got this weekend. Let's talk a little bit about this weekend's games, right? Obviously, we did not advance. Unfortunately, we would love to do that. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Baker Mayfield. Greg, you've coached this guy. I know you guys just grinned when I brought that up, but here's the truth. One of the things you said when you became the interim head coach is you said, Baker, get the damn ball out of your hand quicker, and I don't want you holding on to that thing. And he, what did he do? His sacks went down significantly, like you said, those last several games. Let's talk about this. He's going to go into a hostile environment up there in Detroit. This is a Dan Campbell team that all these guys are buying into what Dan's telling those guys up there. It's really paid off for that investment for the Lions. What do you make of this? Baker's probably statistically best statistically career of his entire career. But what do you take of this? And let's just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, how about this? A big smile comes to my face.
And hold on, guys, real quick. We're going to bring him right back.
And yes.
Sorry, Greg. Go ahead. Repeat that again real quick.
One of the players I've ever coached, but at the halfway point before I took over, we led the league in number of sacks allowed. We were dead last at 38, and the next 8 games he only gave up 2 sacks and 7 hits on the quarterback because he got out of his hand once I got in the middle of his ass about getting rid of the ball. And that's what you got. I played quarterback. I've been an offensive coordinator. I was involved in all the the planning and the calling, and even though on defense Blake took over, he made the calls on defense so I could manage the game in all area. I'm very, very happy for Baker. And I do believe he's only scratched the surface. He's going to continue to improve. And listen to me, you're talking about a guy that the other players on the team rally around. They love and like Baker. And it's going to be a very interesting game this week. The Detroit Lions, there's 4 coaches on that staff that have been with Blake and I before. We had the opportunity to be able to coach Dan, at the Saints and coach Mark Brunell, there. And then Aaron Glenn's a part of this family of coaching. And he's going to have to make sure that in the secondary things on what they're doing there at Detroit, that they has been doing. So it's going to be a really good game.
Blake,
yeah. I mean, I'm a big Baker fan. Been so since before we drafted him. Not surprised by any of it. Kind of surprised it took this long. In terms of but he went to as we see right now, initially, I know he went to the Rams and then over the Panthers, but the Panthers just in a really kind of bad, kind of situation and state in that franchise, right? There's now 2 Heisman Trophy winning, number 1 over all picks that can't get it done there. And I don't think it's because they can't play football. I think that's where we're clearly seeing. But no, I'm so happy for Baker. So happy and energized to see what he's getting ready to do this year, or do here in the playoffs. Like you mentioned, the road environment, what it's going to be like in Detroit and everything, and they're rocking and rolling, and all stuff like that. I mean, that's not going to affect Baker. Baker could go out and throw for 400 yards. Baker could go out and throw 3 picks, right, and get crushed. And it's not going to have anything to do with any sort of hostile environment and whatnot. If anything, if he feels that, it's going to energize him and make him play better, right? He is one of the he's one of the best people I've ever been at self-motivating, putting the chip on his shoulder and in using it versus it using him. I think right, wrong, or indifferent, frankly, I think he gets there's more talked about out there about that because of the position he plays, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the only position he could play where it'd be talked about more is if he played kicker or punter, right, and whatnot. But if he played corner, right, if he played safety, right, if he played wide receiver, I mean, it wouldn't even be you wouldn't even be talking about that. There's way more antics, or way more, cockiness or swag or whatever you want to call it out there by other stuff. But no, I'm so happy to see, what he's doing out there, because he deserves it, right, wrong, or indifferent. He deserves it. He deserves it. This organization here in Cleveland is in a way better place than it was and it would be without him having been here. He had a massive part of that, because there was a cloud here and there was a funk here that couldn't get over with, right? Yeah. And you couldn't get a real veteran who had options to come in here because nobody wanted to touch it. Like veteran quarterback, the type of Pied Piper, right? You couldn't get a Drew Brees or a Peyton Manning or an Aaron Rodgers or something like that in their prime to come in here, right? Sure. And it was such a place that at the time that it was just going to chew up and spit out a young man, right? Like, I don't care. People talk about all the time, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Like, no, those guys would have gone on and played someplace else maybe because of their talent, but they would have gotten their soul crushed, right? Sure. Like here, it required somebody that had enough talent, but it had enough moxie, enough leadership, enough just like don't give an F. Somebody who would actually be like, instead of like shrink and be crushed by that, be instead like energized by it and like come get some, by it. And it was needed, especially at that position. And it's kind of put them in the rest of the organization in the position to be able to be like that now. You know what I mean?
It's going to be a fun game to watch because it's going to be very physical on the line of scrimmages. You're going to see a lot of pressures. You're going to see a lot of, affecting in the run game. It's going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, to your point, Blake, real quick about how Baker had that kind of I don't give a damn attitude. Yep. I remember a reporter after the Browns had won in Denver and, won that game handled that game pretty well throughout the game. And a reporter's like, do you know how long it's been since the Cleveland Browns have won here in Denver? And it was like a long time. Like, it was like 20 some years. He goes, and your point is? Like, he just, okay, yeah. Like that's what he said, right? Like, right. And your point is like I came here to win a game. That's my job. Okay, maybe they didn't win in the past, but I'm here. Let's turn it over to the one that a lot of us are going to be watching. CJ Stroud going into that environment in Baltimore this weekend. What do you think of that game?
I think it's going to be a tough game. I think, again, the line of scrimmage, Baltimore is very, very physical. They do have a dominant defense. Baltimore, if they do not affect CJ's timing in some way, some fashion, if they don't speed up the process for him, it's going to be a back and forth kind of a game that way. And then, obviously I thought last week Houston did a much better job playing the run, and they're going to have to be able to handle the line of scrimmage against these guys there too, and also handle the mobility of Lamar. But it's going to be a very physical, tough game, and it's going to come down, to which team can limit the big plays from the other team.
What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is where the storybook run ends, for the Texans this year. They're not playing the road 2023 Cleveland Browns, right? They're playing at Baltimore. And there's a big difference between, like G-Dub just talked about right there, the defenses, both for this young offensive coordinator and this young quarterback, right? Last week, I've talked about it a lot out there. There was a lot of high level of knowledge about Jim Schwartz and Jim Schwartz's scheme there. I've talked about that like Jim Schwartz's number one protege off of his coaching tree is Matt Burke, the defensive coordinator down there at the Texans. It's very clear that Bobby Slowick, between the first game they played a month ago and this game, sat down there and game planned with him. But the Ravens are not that, right? Like, the Ravens are not that. They lead the league in sacks. They change the picture so much. Like, if you see what Kansas City, did to Tua, who's seen way more than CJ Stroud, in that number one high flying offense of Miami, which is the same family of offense as what's being ran down at the Houston Texans, like, that'll give you a little piece of it. And so what I would say by that is Miami's offense is way better than the Texans offense. Tua's seen a lot more than CJ Stroud has. Mike McDaniel's more experienced play caller, and like what Baltimore is getting ready to unveil and show from like a disguise, a rotation, a like stress point standpoint, like all over the place is way more than even what Kansas City just showed this past week. And so I think it's going to be a really, rough game. And if Houston wins this one, this will be probably the one that I'll be most impressed with.
Right.
If they win this one and play well, because they're going to have to do it differently on offense than they've done it previously when they've had success. This is not going to be this scripted. I know what they're in. I know exactly how we're going to attack this little angle right here, and we're getting all day long to do this. Like, no, it's going to be some come get some like Buddy Ryan-esque, type stuff from Mike McDonald. So it'll be interesting.
And I think it was, we all kind of got a real eye-opening experiences for that Baltimore team to go across the country to San Francisco, and let's just call it ass-handed it to the Niners. I mean, they just obliterated them, and the Niners didn't have an answer, and Shanahan did not have an answer for those guys, which is like I think it was pretty eye-opening for me, because I was like, well, that's the same team that the Browns beat, at their house, and then they went across the entire country and went into San Fran and just had their way. But I am the one of the belief that I also think the AFC is tilted in the power structure of the NFL right now more than the NFC is. Obviously, there's a lot more power, going in the. So let's talk about the Bills, man. A game that got moved to Monday night or Monday afternoon at 4:30 in the afternoon. You have what do you take of this game? And this is a new experience for Mr. Mahomes. He's having to travel on the road. He's had the luxury for many years now to be able to sit in that very deafening stadium of Arrowhead and be able to have that home field advantage. And now he has to go to Buffalo. What do you guys think of this? By the way, Greg, you've played. You've coached there. You understand?
Coached there, yeah. I think the Buffalo Bills are extremely happy that they're having. Kansas City's going to have to come there. They're going to have 3-4 foot of snow during the week right now, and their practices are all messed up on getting ready to go. It doesn't make any difference. The Bills are going to get ready to roll on game day. It's going to be a very good game. And again, Kansas City knows how to play in the elements. The temperature and that type of stuff won't be a big deal. But I think this is going to be a big game for Buffalo. I think that they've got the advantage going into this game. And then Patrick Mahomes is going to have to be able to dodge the snowballs, or all the snowballs coming out of the Bills Mafia that was thrown up there when I was a head coach many years ago. And I think it's going to be a very fun game. But I think Buffalo is happy that the Chiefs are.
Yeah, I totally agree with G-Dub there. Like, just we saw how much this past weekend was non-competitive. This past weekend was the in my lifetime growing up in the NFL, as a kid, like going to all the games, watching all the games, being a fan of it, then coaching in it, doing all that stuff like that. It was the least competitive weekend of playoff football I've ever seen. I mean, it was just straight blowouts across the board, except for the 1-point battle, in Detroit. I just looking at the matchups right now. Excuse me. Thank you. I see this Chiefs Buffalo game that we're talking about, and the Detroit Tampa Bay game. Like, those are the two in my mind right now that I think are going to be the two best games, back and forth, type games. I think it's going to be interesting. I think the Baltimore one is probably going to be rough. I would not put the San Francisco game though past being an interesting and good bout. You know what I mean? From that standpoint, because you have the same thing, right? You have somebody who, and it's been that way before, right? Like, there's been some really good Packers, 49ers playoff games before, right? But you have two head coaches who have such a high level of knowledge in friendship and knowledge of each other and knowledge of how to attack one another, right? Yeah, and so I think that knowledge there, from that standpoint of what hurts each person, can slow it down. Because if you just look at it on paper, the 49ers offense should just completely cream the Packers defense, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah, so to me, that was the biggest kind of like eye-opening thing for me this last weekend was the fact that um, the Packers went into a place where the Cowboys have played extremely well all season and big underdogs, and not only won, but I mean they put a beat down. I mean, what was it, 36-0 at one point in this
Yep.
football game? Like, I mean, that's insane to me. Like, that's like they weren't even showing up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and to do that in front of Jerry Jones and stuff like that, I don't know. That was just shocking to me. So
Mhm.
you're right. Um, I do have one question about this, and I've seen this trend in the NFL with games, and you guys obviously have coached at every level. Uh, I see this, and tell me why this is just from a team stat, and just for whatever reason. You will see a team put up a buttload of points
Mhm.
in a game, like say like the Dolphins when they put up 70 or something like that, and then the very next week they do not have even close to the same offensive output. Why does that happen? And it just seems like there's like a huge drop off the next week sometimes after you have a huge offensive performance. Why? What do you think that is?
Yeah,
Well, well,
I would,
here's the deal. Here's the deal. If the opponent is any good at all, you're going to get the best out of the opponent. You're going to get more effort, more communication, better play because they've already been shocked and they don't want to have their ass whooped the same way that just came on. And their focus and
Yeah.
their intensity is going to be your best. And then to a certain extent, sometimes after those big game right there, some of the guys think they know more than coaches. And all of a sudden, this is just going to repeat every single time. No, it's not. And
Right.
the attention of your opponent, you better be ready to go.
yeah, and I would say on piggyback on that, like there's a difference between just like look at the body of work, right? There's a difference between the like the one-offs are usually defensive. The defense is at fault, right? Like it's not as much about the offense as the defense, right? Like this past weekend, like I mean, it shocked everybody because like that wasn't the necessarily like the Texans offense. Like the Texans offense, as well as CJ Stroud's played. It's not like they've just been this juggernaut this year and whatnot, right? So it surprised everybody, and it was really about the defense. I make that point because like I've seen I've coached on an offense that was different, right? There's a difference when all of a sudden you have the coach, the matchups, the quarterback. It's like we're doing that to everybody every week in, week out. You can't do anything about it, right? And so I coached in that offense, down there at the New Orleans Saints, and like we knew, like we're lining up, and like there's nothing you can do about it. You know what I mean? Sort of things. I remember like I remember us giving up 215 yards to Calvin Johnson receiving in the playoffs. We're out there double covering him with 2 first-round pick DBs, and he's just like still mossing them and whatnot. And like it didn't matter. It didn't matter because we got 49 or 50, at least 40, or 40, 48 or 49 points on the board, and it's like it doesn't matter. It's like we can keep doing this all day long if you want to, sort of thing. And so and you look at like the 2015 Broncos, the 16-0 Patriots. Like there's a couple of those offenses out there. A few years ago, the Chiefs, offense where you say like, oh no, they're going to do this week in, week out. Like there's a difference between that and the one-offs, where defenses just have a bad day or somebody's seen something on film and they've picked at that, scab, and whatnot.
Here we go.
All right. So here's a question, guys. Out of all the games this weekend, which one do you think that has the most potential for an upset out of all those games?
Go ahead, Blake.
Most potential for an upset. I would say technically like the Buffalo game, right? If you're saying Kansas City is the underdog, or I would say I guess the Kansas City Buffalo game.
I think Kansas City and I think Tampa Bay. Those are the 2 teams that do have the ability to do it and to upset. They're going into the game behind and right there as far as picks. But I think both those teams have a chance.
Well, guys, real quick, I'm just going to give a quick shout out to some of our sponsors. Angelo's Pizza. I don't know if you guys have ever had Angelo's Pizza over there in Lakewood. It is amazing pizza. It is awesome pizza. Obviously, our friends over at K&D Property, I have to give them a big shout out because I'm going to actually be living literally in one of their properties, the Halley Building in right downtown Cleveland. The folks over at K&D, and of course the Cleveland Furniture Company. Guys, they have 5 locations in the greater Cleveland area. And look on our page. We're actually giving a recliner away. Follow us, follow the Cleveland Furniture Company to get your free recliner. It's an $800 recliner that we're giving away. And guys, join us on the Browns Fan Cruise. Go to brownsfancruise.com to join Allie and I. And 17 Browns alumni are going to join us. Folks like Hanford Dixon, Eric Metcalf, Webster Slaughter, just to name a few of those guys. And by the way, Larry piped up here and says Greg needs to go on the cruise. I was going to say, well, if he's coaching football, he probably can't go on the cruise. But anyway, guys, this was fun, guys. Like I said, look how quick that hour went. That was pretty quick, and we had a lot of fun, guys. Everybody that left comments, thank you for joining in and grabbing those comments. But as always, guys, stay healthy and go Browns.
Go Browns.
Appreciate you, my man.